I think it's the timeless feel, like the idea that love and passion can be found in any era of time. I think it goes back to and as someone who's a history major and obsesses over like I do like to be historically accurate, but at the same time, even though women back then weren't treated great, like as far as property laws and other stuff, there was a level of gentility and respect for them that we don't have now. So it's like two sides of the same coin. You know, now we can vote, but men are jerks to us. And back then, it's like they opened the doors and laid coats down, so we could walk over puddles, but at the same time, we couldn't vote. So I think there's kind of that attraction of with at least with romance, we get to see sort of the more beautiful side of the past where women were treated differently and a little more with proper reverence, for the fact that we were, not because we were necessarily delicate, but I think back then they understood that women died a lot more in childbirth, and there was kind of a lot more in some ways by good men. There was respect, and when I talk about men I usually mean good men. There was respect for that, the fact that women were you know something to be valued and were precious. And I think we've lost a little bit of that now. Again, good men, I always say good men, feel like that now, and I think that readers like the idea of dressing up, going to balls, and having somebody treat you wonderfully, like kind of like that fairy tale feel. It's sort of like modern day fairy tales in a way. When they're reading historical romance, they have that chance to go back and step into a time period which we know in reality wouldn't have been that great, but it's fun to go back and look at what might have been really fun. Might have been nice for like a minute. Like we wouldn't want to live in that time period, I don't think, but it's fun to pretend. And I think it's like that fantasy element where it's like it's a recognizable era of history, so you're not having to worry about wizards or dragons and all that stuff, so that it's rules and a place they understand from a place of history, but it can still feel like a fantasy.
I love that. And you said it's the beautiful part of the past, recognizing that it wasn't all like that, but this is the beautiful part of it. Celeste?
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think it's the escapism with the potential that you could be that person. And before I started writing historicals, or sorry, mafia, I really wasn't that into contemporary because in my head I was like, I'm never going to have a billionaire come and swoop in with a helicopter. I'm never going to have these yacht getaways. I'm
Oh
never going to
no,
have
it's not
all
going to
these
happen? Oh, yeah.
things. Yeah. And so I was like, this is kind of demoralizing, but I can picture myself back in a historical setting because maybe that could have been me. And so I think that
Oh.
potential for, being able to put themselves into these romances that pull the best of those time periods and the selective reality that is romance across the board appeals to people. And like you said at the beginning, Linda, this potential for visiting a time period that's not our own and to be able to see how things were back then, there's a lot of appeal to that. And then I also think that there's a very innate connection to various diasporas that I think, is sort of that epigenetic soul of folks of wanting to know where they came from and what their folks were like before they reached modern day or modern location. And so I believe that that's largely part of it. And I'm a former history teacher, among other things. And so the accuracy is really important to me without writing curriculum, which I did and no longer do. And I think that those, you know, the nitty gritty of it that we're able to weave into it gives it that authenticity and that validity that in some cases contemporary romance doesn't always have because you're living and breathing it. So you don't necessarily need that woven into the story the same way you would these details that are, unrelatable in a lot of ways.
I love what you said about it's our history. And it takes us back to the possibility of how some of our ancestors may have lived.
Mhm,
And I truly believe that's part of us, that
mhm.
somewhere it's ingrained deeply within us that all of these people existed in those times. And it's just so fascinating to me to think about that. It's so grounding to think about what it was like for them.